Hello, fellow hunters. This is going to be a very special video, different from the typical type of video I produce. I had the awesome opportunity to speak to a well-known content creator in the Monster Hunter community, Rurikhan. And I know that there's been a number of you asking for this. I've been just as excited as you are to talk to someone so well established in the content creation space. This will be a long-form video, almost entirely uncut and completely raw, where we discuss things like the games we love, the gaming industry, the community, and of course, Monster Hunter. So a big thanks to Rurikhan for taking the time to sit with me. His channel will be linked in the description below, so if you haven't taken the time to get to know him in the Monster Hunter space, go take the time. Check out his content, toss him a subscription, and give him all the love he deserves. So grab yourself your favorite drink, get cozy, and enjoy the video. And we are rolling. So tell me a little bit about yourself. And first off, tell me how to pronounce your name. Is it Rurikhan?
Yeah, that works. Or you can just call me Rui, which is my real name. It's fine. Whatever.
Oh, all right. Fantastic.
Because I just tell people, it's like, look, so that you don't have to say Rurikhan the whole time. You can just call me Rui. It's fine. Some people say Ruri. It's fine too. It's whatever. I don't care.
I might not be able to trill my R's like a native speaker.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I try. I mean, I took Japanese in high school, and so their R's are trilled, so there's kind of roll of the tongue. So I've got a little bit of it going on, but...
I mean, I'm giving you like the American version. The Portuguese version would be Rui.
You know what? I'm not even going to try. Oh... Well, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time with me. Obviously, your reputation kind of speaks for itself, and I don't know that you necessarily need a whole lot of introduction. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
The good things. I mean, I've only heard good things, and then obviously my viewership wanted me to reach out to you so we could have a conversation. You're well known in the Monster Hunter space, but you obviously enjoy things like Dark Souls, for instance, and in case you didn't notice.
Is that a Berserk reference or something?
No, this is the
the invasion red soapstone sign. Okay.
Yep.
I couldn't see it at first, but yeah, the invasion. I don't do a lot of PvP in Souls games though, but I don't run away from it either.
No, you got to face it head on, just like the environment. The game is meant to punish you, you know?
Yeah, that was actually one of the, I mean, I don't want to derail us off the bat, but that was one of the things that I didn't like about Elden Ring that I talked about, is that you can't really have organic invasions. You have to like, oh, I want to get invaded now. It's like, no, I don't like that. I want to get invaded when I'm not expecting it and get wrecked by some random person. Because it's that feeling of tension. It's like, oh, I'm like super deep into this dungeon. Somebody can pop up out of nowhere and mess me up. Like, I like that feeling of tension. It feels nice.
Not being able to have that sort of control. It's the same way that horror games work, where it extracts a level of control away from the player to the point that now you're at the mercy of the environment and whatever it's throwing at you.
Yeah, I like that stuff.
Oh, for heaven's sake. I found myself really frustrated when I first started playing the Monster Hunter series. And I touched on this in one of my prior videos where I said, hey, look, I just couldn't get behind the clunky controls. And I played on PSP with Monster Hunter Portable 3rd. I played Tri. I played 4. It wasn't until World that it really stuck for me. But once you do kind of get that groove and you understand, you know, how you're supposed to interact with this environment, that level of control, there's a very satisfying payoff, I feel, which is the same thing that I loved about Dark Souls. Dark Souls, you have so much of that sort of like high difficulty level and a high skill ceiling at the top of it. So when you finally take down that monster or get through that new area and get to the next bonfire, oh, it's so rewarding.
So let me tell you something. This is something that I feel like a lot of people don't realize. But a lot of us don't actually like Monster Hunter the first time we play it.
Really?
Yes, I hated Monster Hunter the first time. I mean, not hate is a strong word. I didn't particularly care for it because there was this friend of mine that was always telling me about Monster Hunter, And eventually I had a Wii, and this is when Monster Hunter Tri came out. So my friend couldn't play it because he didn't have a Wii. And he kept telling, oh man, but the game is so good. You need to get it. It's going to be amazing. And I was like, okay, fine. So I even got like the I don't know if it was collector's edition. It had like this paper chest on it, and it came with the controller and all these things. I was like, fine. And then I put the thing on the console and I start playing, and I was like, wow, these controls are terrible. So how did it, why are there no levels in this game? I just run around this map. Like, what's going on? So yeah, I also didn't like it the first time that I played it. And let me tell you something else. I don't know if you know, but even Gaijin Hunter didn't like it the first time he played it.
Really?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people don't like Monster Hunter the first time they play it. So what worked for me was that friend of mine that was like super into Monster Hunter. Eventually, I had a Vita, and so I bought Freedom Unite on the Vita. And interestingly enough, you could actually play ad hoc with the Vita with a PlayStation Portable, because he had the PlayStation Portable, and those two things were just like super compatible, no problem.
Love that.
So I booted up on the Vita, played ad hoc with him, and that's when it clicked, because, you know, I needed him there to kind of like tell me, listen, you don't get it, okay? This game is not the type of game that you go through levels, you kill a couple of minions, then you kill a boss, and boom, done. No, you just kill the boss, you peel off his skin, you make a funny hat, and then you go and you kill something bigger, and then you peel off their skin, and you make a weapon, and then I was like, all right. And so, you know, that's kind of like how I eventually got started liking Monster Hunter.
They've got so much depth to a lot of the mechanics. I mean, whether it's the crafting mechanic, whether it's the gathering mechanic, whether it's the hunting mechanic, you've got so much to do. It's a very content dense game, and it's not exactly, at least not until World, was it really intuitive or even user friendly. You had to, you had to really want it and then sink yourself into it. And then you can kind of understand what people are talking about. And I had a similar friend who had said, like, if you like Dark Souls, and this was the height of my Dark Souls craze. I was playing Dark Souls 1 over and over again. And he was like, look, if you like big bossed monsters and you want to go hunting and you want to be able to like summon people in and be able to co-op together, you're going to love you're going to love Monster Hunter. And I'm like, yeah, but I could be playing Dark Souls.
Yeah.
It was tough for me.
It takes a while to get used to it, but it's one of those things that once it clicks, there's really nothing quite like it in the industry, because of the way that like they do the monsters, which there's a degree of like believability to it, because they get inspired by real life creatures and they kind of mix match them together to create these things. And just the way in which they move, it feels real, even though it really isn't. But there's something special about it that sometimes I can't even put my finger on it, but it is about the monsters and how they react to you, and in the way that you get to attack them. Because like World also shows you something that you can't really do in a lot of games, because like in a lot of games when you have a big monster, what are you going to be attacking? Is little toes. You attack the monster's little toes. That's what you do. Right. And in Monster Hunter, there's usually moves and things that you can do with the weapons that it's not just that, especially in Monster Hunter World. Like you can go with dual blades and you can become like friggin', what was his name? Captain Levi from Attack on Titan.
Oh, yeah.
Like going down the back. And there's all of these different things you can do. You can mount the monsters. Like just even today, I was thinking about it as I was mounting a Teostra. And I was like, dude, this game really is something. Like I'm flying in the middle of the air on top of this monster, bashing him in the head, bringing him down. Like there's not that many games where you get to do stuff like that.
I mean, if you've played the Safi Siege, which I know you have, and and Safi grabs you, right? And then all of a sudden you're getting a face full of blast, right? Like she's just ripping you apart. And then, you know, you walk away with 1 HP. Sure, it's not an instant kill, but still, I mean, what sort of game can you fall from literal stories down a cliff, land at the bottom in a puddle, and be like, oh yeah, cool, that's normal.
Yeah, it's fine. There's no fall damage. Who cares?
I love it, as opposed to Glass Ankles Geralt from The Witcher.
Oh man, I love The Witcher 3. I think it's a fantastic game. I can't get into the combat of that game.
It was very highly recommended to me by someone who also loves Dark Souls, and I did play it. I streamed it a few years ago and played through it. It is A great game. Absolutely no hate for it,
Yeah.
but it didn't really connect with me. I felt like I was like, okay, I'm playing kind of like an open world dark fantasy RPG. I get it. But I think that with you calling attention to two things, first the Witcher and whatnot, that is an open world game, and that's been a big buzzword around Wilds. As well as the monster behavior that you mentioned, all the way down to something that you almost couldn't put your finger on. And in fact, that's something that I'm touching on in my latest video that I haven't produced yet. I haven't released it yet. But it talks about how Capcom has gone through great lengths to have a sense of realism, because if they miss that mark just the tiniest bit, they find themselves deep in the trenches of the uncanny valley.
It depends on the title that you're talking about.
Sure.
They go to great lengths on it in like World and Iceborne.
Yeah.
But like if you look at something like Rise and Sunbreak, they just kind of like throw everything off the wall. There's like, yeah, sure, there's some degree of realism there, but there's also a lot of arcadiness. And it's the same thing if you look at like Generations Ultimate. I don't know if you've played that one, but like you have the hunter arts, you do some really crazy stuff. So I actually like the contrast of it. Where you have these entries like World, and I'm assuming Wild is going to be more in line with that.
Right.
And then you have these more the portable entries where they just like, no, and here you go crazy. And I think it's cool because it gives you contrast. You have this more grounded version, and then you have the more arcade version. And I like playing them both. But since we recently just came from Rise Sunbreak, now I want a more grounded version.
Right. And I love the heartbeat pattern, actually. I built out a timeline of the different releases between the mainline team and the portable team, and kind of tracked the heartbeat pattern between them. And you can see how they definitely inspired one another within the releases, and how they kind of took a beat from the other and then integrated that into their formula in the next game, whether it was the mainline team from the portable team or the portable team from the mainline team. And I think that Rise definitely bears some marks from, say, World, for instance, with regards to like mounting the monster, although you're not really mounting it, for instance, but it definitely is much more arcadey.
Mounting comes from 4.
Right.
4 Ultimate is not 4 Ultimate in the West, but like actually 4 in Japan is where they first started doing mounting. Wyvern riding, as far as I'm concerned, is something completely new. I see that as a completely new system.
Not even an extension of mounting, just completely. No. That's fair.
That's fair. I think it's a completely new system because you gain an incredible degree of control over the monster.
Right.
And I had fun with it in the beta, particularly doing like fights. So a friend of mine would mount one monster, I would mount another, and we would like battle it out to see who
Clash
would win.
of the kaiju.
we actually had like PvP matches and whatnot, and that was fun. But it's like Wyvern riding is one of those things that I feel is fun for like the first, I don't know, 5-10 times or whenever you do it with a new monster. But after a while, I was like, this is just way too powerful. And there is something that is lost by that, because like, for instance, Monster Hunter World, when there's 2 monsters in the same area, now I don't use dung pods because I like the challenge of like, there's 2 monsters here. How can I do this? And it's really cool because you can use one of the monsters to shield yourself against the other one, because he'll take the hits while you're punishing from the other side. And there's a degree of strategy to it and a degree of chaos that I really like. And in Rise and Sunbreak, it didn't have that at all. Whenever a monster was coming over, you're like, great, Wyvern ride time, let's go.
It does shift the dynamic quite a bit, doesn't it? Because in the earlier entries too, you would have to rely a bit more on the dung pods, because you just had less agency. Now, for me, when another monster is coming up while I'm having a good time with my buddy Nargacuga over here, and then Zinogre wants to wreck my day, well, somebody's going to get a flinch shot to the face, and they're going to collide, and then I get extra materials right there. So I invite those sort of situations, but like in earlier entries, I might have been like, oh, this is unfortunate.
In earlier entries, it was way tougher because monsters didn't deal that much damage to one another, and you had very little control over what would happen. So it's much harder to maintain the situation, especially if you're playing solo.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely designed to be a game that you could play with friends. I think that was really, especially after 1 and then into DOS, you would definitely want to rely on your friends a lot more, or go hunting with your friends, because that was kind of novel at the time in the PS2 era as well. But circling back to the other point where we're talking about open world, And this being a big buzzword in association to Wilds, like everybody's talking about it. Everybody's kind of got their own spin, their own take about the open world, whether or not we're going to get an open world or what sort of open world it's going to look like in the end product. So for you, what's your take and where are you leaning right at the moment?
So there's kind of like what I wish it would be, and then there's the things that I'll be perfectly fine if it ends up that way. So like my ideal scenario is everything is part of the open world with no loading screen. So I'm talking like you actually go up to the gate of the hub and you enter the hub physically and you're there.
Yep.
And then you leave the hub whenever you go on hunts and all of this stuff. And that's kind of like the ideal version of what I want. But if we still get maps, I'm also perfectly fine with it. If the maps are all linked together and there's maybe like a loading screen between the hub and the maps, I think that's fine. Now, the reason that I think it's an open world is because if you pay attention to the trailer, you notice that you never really see the hunter on foot.
Not at all.
Not at all. So like one of the main characters of that trailer is not just the hunter, but it's the mount itself.
Yep.
Now I look at a mount and I'm like, I see a means of traversal. Because even in Rise and Sunbreak, sure, you see the Palamute, but you also see the hunter on foot doing things.
Right.
And that in Wilds, there's no shot at all of the hunter doing anything. Everything is on the mount. To me, that's like a heavy emphasis on the mount, which to me means traversal. And if there's a cool means of traversal, it also can indicate that it is an open world. Now, is it a big leap? Yeah, it's a big leap, but it is kind of like, I feel, the next logical leap of the series to take.
No, I 100% agree. And in fact, I did an entire video literally on the mount, magnifying what the potential that means and what that implies for the game when you say open world. Because if you look at it and you look at the mount, okay, the mount not only does have like mobility and it's going to traverse the world faster, sure, but you also see things like multiple weapons, so it's carrying things in a pouch. It's got the tent rolled up on the back, so it's suggesting that there's going to be a measure of camping or rest site establishment out on the field. And then on top of that, you're also talking about the gliding effect. And what other games do we see in the industry? This was all covered in that video, but what other games in the industry do we see? I mean, we see games like Breath of the Wild. I highlighted GTA because there was glitch gliding in GTA, and that was kind of funny. And then there was also like Batman, for instance, Genshin Impact. These are all games that use gliders, and they had put a heavy emphasis on navigating the environment and freedom of motion within it. There wouldn't be a need for that unless there was a fully open world. Otherwise, they would just do tail raiders all over again. Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, I'm not sure how happy they were with tail raiders because they gave us a Palamute where we had full control of where it was going, right?
Right.
In Monster Hunter Rise. So my thought on it is, and I've gone like super deep into the rabbit hole of what the mount can potentially do.
I love it.
But my thought on that is like, I'm hoping that they do dynamic traversal. Have you ever played something like, say, Guild Wars 2 and the mounts that they have?
I played Guild Wars, the original one, but my brother was big into Guild Wars 2 because of that, and he shared a lot of that with me.
So like the mounts, they have active traversal where you actually have to do stuff while the mount is going around in order for the mount to go faster. And I kind of feel like they can do something like that, and you can go so fast to the point where fast travel potentially wouldn't even make sense. And even if we do get fast travel, I hope that we get it much, much later in the game. So that we first learn how to traverse the maps properly using the mount and doing all of that. But fundamentally, I want dynamic traversal in the open world game in a way that almost like the Spider-Man game. A lot of the things in Spider-Man is about the traversal and web slinging and all of that. Now, we're not going to web sling with the mount, obviously, but just having active things that you can do while moving in the mount, that would make sense in a Monster Hunter setting. And that would make traversal so enjoyable that why would you want to use fast travel to begin with?
Right. I mean, take, for instance, what they did at the tail end of Iceborne, right? What's the end game? Excuse me. What's the end game area where you get materials for augmentation? The Guiding Lands. They've already done a small scale contiguous map with all of the biomes represented in one map. All you've got to do is turn up that scale, and then you've suddenly got a much larger world where all the biomes are represented. I'm not entirely. Go ahead.
And you can kind of see that when the at the end shot of the trailer. As a matter of fact, not even just the end shot of the trailer. If you go to the official website, they give you the exact same thing, which is like the sand clearing away. And if you pay attention, the sand clears away like way further into the distance. And it's like, if you don't have those assets loaded in a way that allows you to kind of like go there eventually, why do you need to load in the effect going all the way into God knows where? You don't need that.
Right. It would just be completely like superfluous at that point. Like it would just, it would be meaningless unless it's meant to represent something. In a lot of the theory crafting that I've been doing in my videos, I've emphasized a lot of the patterns and a lot of the intentionality that Capcom brings to their aesthetic design. And especially with how they usually they will put suggestions or hints to something in their announcements, in their logos and imagery, in just about everything that they have. There is a very intended purpose behind why they would display such a thing and what that could mean. And so for them to have, especially right as that last camera pan, right, and then you see that sand like kind of sweeping over, and then you see like the brush kind of come up from the sand, for instance. For what reason would they do something like that apart from that it looks cool? Well, they clearly have some intent with something that's going to be dynamically loaded in as you traverse. And there's probably going to be, I mean, we know that we're going to have weather patterns, for instance, based upon the storm that comes in. Are there going to be things that are going to be like monster elements that are going to affect the environment? Or are there going to be seasonal patterns and bringing that back into the formula? There's a lot. It really is quite interesting to me to be able to think about what all the potential could be.
I don't know about seasonal patterns because I feel like the storm changes so fast.
It does.
It feels more to me like it's an Elder Dragon type of situation where this monster's so powerful he can affect like the weather of a specific area in a way that, you know, you get those lightning storms and all of that stuff, which is the reasoning why we got the lightning rods and whatnot. But I don't know if that represents seasons, but I'd be here for it. Something somewhat similar to Monster Hunter DOS seasons and whatnot, and having these monsters only come out during this season. So you have to kind of like mix, not min-max, but like manage when you hunt certain things and when it's a good time to hunt certain, you know, that is something that I'm very passionate about. The problem becomes, how does this work in a multiplayer setting?
Right.
Is everybody on the same seasons? Do seasons change like on a daily? Like, how does it work? That is all very interesting, but you have to figure out what the interaction is going to be like in multiplayer, I feel.
Right. And what would be the development cost, so to speak, to be able to make something like that actually happen? Because it would be pretty heavy to be able to come up with a system that would then calculate or synchronize what those seasons or what those weather patterns are supposed to be across multiple people who are playing the game with you.
I don't think that budget's going to be a problem for them at this point, considering that Monster Hunter World, it instantly became like Capcom's most successful title of all time when it released. So it's like, I don't think that anybody's going to be looking at Rio's, hey, I don't know if we want to spend this amount of money on Monster Hunter. Like, no, I don't think that's happening.
That's his life mission.
Like, hey, you need some more money? You need some more money for your Monster Hunter game? Hey, it was just, yeah, exactly. Just throwing it out.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, that is his life passion, and obviously with the overwhelming success that was Monster Hunter World, I mean, they they traditionally expected to be able to reliably sell 4 million copies of a Monster Hunter game, for instance. And then in just the first 3 days, Monster Hunter World sold 5 million. So
I mean, Monster Hunter World was something that, to me as a content creator, I was so happy just to get a worldwide release. Yeah. Because I had been wanting to cover Monster Hunter games for so long, but I couldn't really do it properly because they would come out 1 year early in Japan. There was even a time in my life where I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn Japanese and I'm going to be ready when the next Monster Hunter game comes out. And then I was like, you know what? Let's maybe not do that. I don't think that's a good reason to learn a new language.
Don't get me wrong. I've loved learning Japanese, but having played Portable Third in Japanese, it's a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. But like, I genuinely considered it because I really wanted to cover the game and just do it day one. and I never could.
Mm.
Like this was to the point where when I wanted to get started covering World, I was like, okay, so World's going to be a worldwide release. This is going to be awesome. I start doing like videos about it and telling people why the series is cool because I had played the previous games a ton. And eventually I messaged Socks, who was the community manager at the time. And I wasn't planning on going to Gamescom. And Socks tells me, oh, yeah, I'm going to be at Gamescom. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to Gamescom.
Nice.
So I just straight up go to Gamescom and I go and I see a bunch of other games. I'm like, I don't care about these other games. I just want to play Monster Hunter World. Like these other games are like my excuse to come to Gamescom.
Right.
But I just want to come and play Monster Hunter World. Like that was it.
I mean, to be fair, when they announced it at E3 2017, I mean, the response was overwhelming, right? So
I was blown away. I was watching. I think, was I even streaming that? I think I was probably streaming that, and I was watching, and I was like, wait, Monster Hunter on PlayStation? What do you mean? Because like Monster Hunter had only been on Nintendo consoles right. It was on PlayStation initially, then it went to Nintendo consoles exclusively for a bunch of years. So I expected the next Monster Hunter game to be on Switch.
Right.
And when I see it on PlayStation, I was like, wait, what?
Oh, what's my goodness.
Yeah, and it was weird.
And then we got Rise, of course, which did end up coming out on Switch, which was exclusively Switch for a hot minute. But with the way that they've just the leaps and bounds I feel that they've had over the course of the last console generation has just been absolutely incredible. So for the PS5 release to come out in 2025 alongside, Xbox and PC, obviously, rip our Switch fans, but
I mean, hey, maybe Nintendo will have the Switch 2 out by then. Who knows? But I doubt it.
Well, whether or not it gets a Switch release or maybe a Switch 2 port down the line, I mean, for me, it's an easy bag. Like I'm just going for it. There's the moment that we get that announcement where I can pre-order it. It's just an instant pre-order for me.
What platform are you going for?
So I'm going to be getting it on PC. I do most of my gaming on PC. I do have a PS5. And I think the only thing that might sway me in that is in the event that the PC release doesn't get a physical release, because that I'm going to try to get the biggest and best version that I can. Yeah. But in the event that I can't, I may have to get it for PS5.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, it's very sad for me, but I'm kind of giving up on physical editions because it's just like, look, the publishers don't care. Why do I care?
Fair.
Right? It's like, I want to have physical editions, but I want to have physical editions that work and don't feel like they're gimped. For instance, if you have the physical edition of Rise, you have Rise 1.0. What good is that?
Right. Right. And then it's got to patch it in.
It'll give you like a good 100 hours if you want to grind it for a bit, but it's missing all of the content from 3.0, and 3.0 is when Rise really hit its stride. So yeah, it's just like physical editions nowadays are incredibly disappointing. And I say this, and I spent like €100 or whatever on the Baldur's Gate 3 physical edition for PlayStation 5. But it's one of those. It's one of those things where I'm trying to like start cutting back on buying physical editions because unfortunately they haven't really been worth it for a while now. Yeah, so for me, I'm gonna get it on PC. PC is probably gonna be my main platform, and they've said that they're developing first for the PC now and then porting for consoles, which is what makes sense, right? Because it's easier to downgrade it than to just have a port and then try to how am I gonna finagle this to work on PC?
Right. And we saw a bit of that actually with World's release too, though, because it was supposed to be simultaneous, and then they had to push the PC release back. What was it? It was almost 8 months, 8 months.
I don't think it was supposed to be simultaneous. I don't think they had planned on a PC release. They were just doing consoles at the time. Well, but eventually they decided to do PC. Actually, I think that's the way it goes, but I don't remember. It's been a long time.
It's been a few years
to begin with. Yeah.
Oh man, but I remember when it came out on PS4. My community leader at the time, like I was full into Twitch streaming at the time. And my community leader, he was the one who managed my Discord and a lot of the back end stuff for the maintenance. He was streaming and got it at the midnight release and literally streamed it all night long, and that was a lot of wow factor for me on a PS4, no less. And this game comes out and I'm like, that's Monster Hunter. It was incredible.
It was a huge push for them, because up until that point, I feel like a lot of people that started with Monster Hunter World don't realize, but up until that point, all we had was segregated maps by zones,
Right.
which only people that since then have gone back and played like GU will be aware that, like, you used to have one zone, then you would exit that zone, go to another zone. So a map would actually be comprised of several different zones linked by little things, and a lot of people don't even know about that stuff.
I know.
So they're just like, oh, it's a big map, big deal. It's like, it's a massive deal.
It really is. The way that they approach the development process in World, they wanted navigation in this new quasi seamless environment, but I mean, one map didn't have zones anymore, and so a lot of that sped up the navigating of that map, and kind of how you would interact with it. And so when they designed that, they realized, well, everything's moving at such a faster pace now, and everything else kind of has to fall in line along with it. I mean, we used to have to use paintballs to be able to track a monster. They were great.
Paintballs, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. The scout flies get confused a lot for me. I don't know about you.
There's a trick that you can do, which was actually people told me recently on stream, because it's not like I did it before, but there's a trick you can do. If you look at where the scout flies are in your belt, they're aiming in a certain direction. You can kind of see like a small line, and you can see where you have to go when they're like, when you're looking back and there's scout flies over there, there's scout flies up there. And it's like, you just look at your belt and there's like a straight line, a very small straight line, and you can see the direction.
Okay, well, that makes things a lot easier for me, because I'm looking at the guy and I'm like, dude, I don't know it any better than you do at this point.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird the way that they kind of work. Sometimes they get a little bit drunk.
Go home, Scoutflies. You are drunk, but you're a fan of the paintball. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the paintball, and I think that one of the reasons why I've started speaking more about paintballs and how I want some type of tracking to come back is, like, in World we had the scout flies, but even the scout flies, after a little bit, you can just, well, not after a little bit, after a long time of you picking up a bunch of footprints and whatnot, eventually the scout flies can just know where the monster is almost from the get-go. Right. If they don't know from the get-go, you pick up like one footprint, you get to go,
there you
know where the monster is.
Right.
So the tracking factor, while present throughout a large portion of your Monster Hunter World experience, when you get to the end game, the tracking factor is also not really there. And to the point where in Rise and Sunbreak, they were comfortable, like, we'll just remove the tracking factor. And I was like, no, that's not cool. I don't like jumping into a map and I know everything that is on the map and I know exactly where they are. It's just like, in a lot of ways, it even makes the maps feel a lot smaller. Even though the maps in Rise and Sunbreak, they are, objectively speaking, slightly smaller in some certain circumstances. They're not really small maps. They're still big, but they feel small because, like, you know exactly where the monsters are. And because you know the layout of the map, you know exactly how to get there fast. So you just go through the maps at breakneck speed and they just feel like they're small.
Well, how are you supposed to appreciate, like, all of the endemic life or all of the world and ecology around you?
You don't put it there. Rise and Sunbreak is not that much endemic life to begin with.
All right, that's fair.
I don't want to be mean for Rise and Sunbreak, because I feel like there's a lot of people nowadays that are coming out of the woodwork and they're just like taking a dump all over Rise and Sunbreak, like with the Return to World campaign. People are like, this was always the better game and screw the other two. And it's like, no. Rise and Sunbreak were amazing. There's certain things that I would criticize about them, like I would like there to be some tracking element, and there's literally none because the Kahoot always detects everything. But, you know, despite its flaws, I greatly enjoyed Rise and Sunbreak, and I will continue to sing its praises for a long time to come. And I think that people who played Rise and Sunbreak for like 200, 500 hours, and all of a sudden they're like, I don't like this game. It's like, so why'd you play it 500 hours then? Shut the hell up.
Clearly you did. Something's not adding up here, okay?
There's something weird.
Right. I feel like there's such a dichotomy. If there's ever like an argument, and this is usually not the case for Monster Hunter fans, I find that Monster Hunter fans are usually wanting to come at it like, let's all go hunting together, and there's that sort of kindred camaraderie, right? But the one thing that has created tension has actually been the discussion between people in the World camp and people in the Rise camp. and they're not like, no, mine's better, and no, mine's better. And I find that that's just so unnecessary, because both games have their merits.
Exactly.
Both games brought something interesting to the table, and both games appeal to different players for different reasons. And Capcom's laughing their way to the bank. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, like, they know what they're doing, and they delivered a product that people wanted to play.
And I want to make sure that people understand that once, once Wilds comes around and we play through Wilds, and then we get whatever is going to be the G rank expansion of Wilds, and then eventually that is kind of like all said and done, and I'll have like, I don't know, 3,000 hours of gameplay, and I'm like, man, what a trip. I want the next one to be like Rise and Sunbreak. Let's go. That's what I want. I love the contrast. It's like, now give me something arcadey and crazy and off the wall. I want my gun lance to shoot lasers. Let's go. Like, just really dial it up to 11. I don't care. And then the one after that, I'm going to be like, okay, now let's go back to a more grounded approach. I think the contrast is what makes it so nice.
It is very special. And again, it appeals to different people for different reasons. Both are okay. There's no reason for us to have this kind of like Monster Hunter Civil War, you know, arguing about which one is going to be better, which one's going to be worse, because objectively speaking, there isn't a better or worse one. It's just a newer or older one. And subjectively speaking, then that goes into what your opinions are, what your preferences are, and what you're looking for when you walk into the game, like what your expectations were.
Quoting Gaijin Hunter, the best Monster Hunter is the one you're playing right now.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
That's the best Monster Hunter.
Speaking of Gaijin Hunter, I actually quoted him in one of my videos too, where we were talking about the logo in Monster Hunter Wilds. I got a little bit of grief from some folks who were like, oh, come on, stop with the logo. But the whole pattern of heads in the mainline releases, are you do you agree with Gaijin Hunter on his stance? Yes. Where okay, I figured as much.
I mean, I don't think it's about agreeing. It's a fact. It's like it's proven correct in all of the previous logos. Like, hey, here's the first generation. There's one wyvern. Here's the second. There's two. Here's the third. There's three. I mean, it's like I didn't see it the first time I looked at the logo during the Game Awards. But in my defense, the Game Awards was at like, I don't know, 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. by the time they were ending, and it was the last trailer, and I was like, "Ooh,
Monster Hunter!"
Yeah, Monster Hunter is great. I love it. But I actually even thought that it could have been like a spin-off, because all they show is the hunter on top of the mount. So I was thinking like, oh, it could be like a spin-off thing. But then when, after the thing was over and I was starting to think more about it, I was like, no, there's no way it's a spin-off. You're crazy. No, it's Monster Hunter 6, 1,000,000%.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And
then there's the heads thing. Yeah.
So that was where I started to realize just how intentional that Capcom was, where they kind of show these little teasers or these little hints and kind of express a lot of what to expect in their imagery and in the language that they use to describe the game when they're talking about, like when Ryozo talks to the audience, for instance, and he's very intentional with his language. They all are. And I feel like, especially with the 20th anniversary of Monster Hunter this year and the 40th anniversary of Capcom last year, and then Wilds coming out next year, Capcom has so much in store for us that I don't think that they've even discussed or touched on yet.
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%. Like I'm expecting some surprises around the anniversary date, but I'm also not getting like super hyped, because I don't want to be disappointed, because that's one of the problems that people have, where they get like super hyped around something. Like, for instance, me and Gaijin, we discussed multiple times that like there were a bunch of people reporting the next Monster Hunter is going to be announced at the not the Game Awards, what was it called? The Tokyo Game Show. Everybody was discussing that, and eventually Gaijin goes and actually looks at the translation of the article that people were quoting. And all it said was, Ryo's was like, oh, I'm really excited to go back to events. Like, that's it. and because of that, everybody's like, oh, next Monster Hunter, 1,000,000%. It's going to be at Tokyo Game Show. And everybody worked themselves up into a frenzy, and then it wasn't there. So it's like, I like controlling my expectations. Right. So even for the Game Awards, I was like, there's potential for it being announced there, but it might also just be announced, on the 20th anniversary. So
Right.
it's like, if it gets announced there, great. If it's not, it's not a big deal. I was actually expecting the Elden Ring DLC to get announced there much more than Monster Hunter, but hey, I'll
Right.
take
Yeah.
what I can get.
Whoops. Sorry about that. Unfortunately, there's my fellow Elden Ring fans who kind of chimed in some of my comments too. They were expecting the DLC and they were a little bit disappointed by that, and I was pretty surprised.
Did you see? Did you see the Zeostorm reaction when Monster Hunter comes up?
No.
So Ratatosker was so evil because he after Ratatosker was done with his stream of the Game Awards, he tuned into the Zeostorm stream. And basically he just filmed himself reacting to Zeostorm, and Zeostorm's like super pumped for Elden Ring DLC, and he's like, okay, this is it, it's the last trailer, this is the time. And then he sees the first couple of pictures and he goes like, Monster Hunter, with like the biggest disappointment. Like, I love Zeostorm, he's an awesome dude, but like, it was just funny seeing him with like the biggest disappointment on his face.
No,
because it's Monster Hunter.
Well, maybe he needs to just do what you and I did, where we finally decided, okay, we're gonna try something different and move away from Dark Souls. Yeah, we'll do Monster Hunter.
I was speaking to Ratatosker, and I said exactly that. It's like, listen, we need to bring him into the fold, and he just needs to play some Monster Hunter.
There it is.
and during the video, Ratatosker is just like laughing his ass off, like super loud. It's a really funny thing.
I've absolutely. If I were to just type in Zeostorm reaction to Monster Hunter Wilds or something,
you should look Ratatosker Zeostorm reaction to Monster or something like that. You'll find. I'll look up the video and I'll show it to you afterwards. Yeah,
fantastic. Oh man, I love that. When I saw the initial camera pan, like when it kind of opened up and there's you saw the small monsters there, the pangolin looking monsters with the endemic birds that are perched on them, and I'm like, wow, okay, this seems kind of neat. And then it kind of pans, and then you see the hunter, and they're on their mount, and I'm like, wow, this feels sort of Capcom-ish. And then then the big woolly boys that come over the horizon as they're running away from the storm that ensues, and then there's the lightning crashing and this whole environment, and I'm like, well, this really feels like Capcom. What's going on here? And I, like you, actually thought it was going to be some sort of spin-off or like a completely separate IP that was in the vein of Monster Hunter, but not necessarily Monster Hunter. And then Capcom shows up, like on that last bit of the trailer, the Capcom logo shows up, and I'm like, oh, don't tell me this is what I think it is. And then Monster Hunter, and you see Rathalos fly in. My wife and I shouted. We were screaming. We were so happy.
So initially, I actually thought it was something else, mostly because of the audio.
It was very different. It didn't carry.
I liked it, but it was very different. So I wasn't expecting it to be Monster Hunter. Like the only thing that threw me off was the audio, because I was like, oh, it's Monster Hunter. And then I go like, no, wait, because of the music that I'm listening to, I was like, this is not Monster Hunter at all. This almost sounds sci-fi-ish. And that was another thing. Do you know Davi Vosk? Davi Vosk did like a full-on analysis of that video, and he got the exact same vibes as I did, which is like, oh, it's all sci-fi, and it almost gives you like this ancient civilization vibe and all of these things.
Yep.
And so that really threw me off at the beginning of the trailer, but as it went on, I was like, yeah, this is Monster Hunter 100%.
I was literally going to ask you if you've been watching Davi Vosk.
Oh yeah, we had him. I've been watching him shortly before we had him on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I basically and shortly after that, I just like consumed like his whole library of games that I had played, and I was looking over every single music. So yeah, he does a really good job with it.
I love how very, very easily he makes a lot of like the musical themes that are common in composition or common to music buffs, for instance.
You know that he also speaks Portuguese, right?
I did not know that. Now that explains why they act. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So did you have that too in common? Were you able to have an exchange in your native languages?
Yeah, a little bit, but not too much because, you know, we didn't want it to speak in Portuguese and have Gaijin not understand what we're saying.
Saying, right? But
But yeah.
did you watch the one that he did of Rotten Vale?
That one was recent, right? I don't think
It
I saw
was
that one
just a
yet.
couple
Yeah,
days ago, a week maybe.
I haven't seen that one yet, but I want to get to it because the Rotten Veil also has like that the and I was like, oh man, I love that. Yeah.
So that was where you started to see some of those like sci-fi aspects. There's a heavy use of synth. The Monster Hunter has always been that sort of tribal. You know, you get
orchestral and tribal. Yeah,
exactly. So there's definitely a very consistent theme, apart from Proof of a Hero, but you know, like there's a very consistent theme to the type of instruments that are used and the cadence of the music itself. And then you get something like Rotten Vale, which is like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then the battle music in Rotten Vale, I mean, it absolutely slaps. And then it isn't until you start thinking about like maybe Rotten Vale, for instance, that you then start to think, oh, Wilds does kind of fit in that same sort of way.
Yes, it does. The music that they give you in Wilds most definitely fits in with the same type of music that you get in Rotten Vale, but I haven't really explored that possibility all too deeply yet to be like, oh, what could this possibly be? I mean, the initial connection just by trying to entertain that idea that I'm making is like goes back to the whole thing where some people are saying, oh, this could be like another Zora Magdaros situation where it exploded somewhere else, and now we're exploring that landmass and seeing what is happening there.
So you're talking about a separate Zora Magdaros kind of working its way up an Everstream, so to speak, and yeah, okay. So it's on its own.
That's one of the theories that I've heard from the community, because I definitely believe that this game is going to take place in the new world.
Okay, the same new world that Monster Hunter World occurred in.
Yes.
Yeah, I would love to see like that expanded on. And to see more of that, or to see the world that we got in Monster Hunter World represented as a cohesive, seamless world as we expect or anticipate to see in Monster Hunter Wilds, like to be able to go back to some old locales from World would be.
You want to go from the ancient forest to the Wildspire Wastes because you can see the Wildspire Wastes from
in the distance, right? Yeah. And the Rotten Vale is literally beneath the Coral Highlands. I mean, positionally speaking, they're the same spot, just one's higher.
Imagine the verticality,
right? And that would just be
fighting in a Doggeron all the way from the bottom of the Rotten Vale into the top of the Coral Highlands. Now that would be something.
That would be something. Or dragging Namael down to the Rotten Vale. I mean, think about it.
Soak up some effluvium. See how you like that.
Maybe wash some of it away so I don't have to deal with Valhazak. But you know, thinking about that and how much time that I've spent at least theory crafting, I'm fairly new to the Monster Hunter content creation space, as I mentioned to you in our messages when I introduced myself. But even in just this short span of time, like how much of this gets me hype and how excited I am just to have the opportunity to entertain ideas of what could be. Do you think that with all of this theory crafting that we as a community are doing, that there's a potential that we might be setting our expectations just a little bit too high and getting too overhyped to the point that we're setting ourselves up for disappointment?
See, that's the thing. I think it's interesting how people sometimes get disappointed in games. Sometimes I feel like I'm much simpler than the average video game consumer, because to me it's more like, hey, is the game fun? Cool. Did everything that I say about, like, say for instance, okay, I'll make like 10 videos theory crafting about all the things that could potentially be in Wilds. Like I've already made a video talking about how it can be open world, how I want to have switch skills, all of these things, right? To me, if every single thing that I say is wrong and the game is different, at the end of the day, I don't care so long as the game is fun.
Right.
I'm not going to be disappointed because, you know, some arbitrary thing didn't turn out the way that I was going to be. So I can speculate nonstop and not really have a problem when the game releases if it doesn't live up to all of the expectations that I put to it. I've noticed, however, that the gaming community most definitely has a much harder time dealing with that. So I don't know if we're setting ourselves up to failure or not. I hope not. And, I'm going to keep doing speculation. And I just hope that people realize that if things don't work out the way that we're all expecting, it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is going to be bad.
Right. The unfortunate part of that too is when you set yourself up with all of these high expectations, it is going to, you're setting yourself up for a hard time when those expectations are not met. And we have to walk into it with realistic expectations, anticipating that, hey, I could be literally right on every theory that I craft and be 100% right on the money and still walk away not liking the end product, even though I was right. And then, there's
that potential too.
There's the other piece of it too, that even if I'm right here in now, that Capcom could still do a 180 somewhere or go a different direction midway through the development cycle. And for me, I've got to trust that, hey, Capcom's got a lot of longevity in this business. They know what they're doing. And when they doubled down on their creative direction for Monster Hunter World, that's what sold millions. So if they're doing that again, then I have no reason to doubt them. Let them take their creative liberties or whatever it is they do. What's that?
Let them cook.
Exactly. Let them cook and let them do what they do best. And then I get to enjoy the results of it. All I got to pay is like $70.
I just, in a lot of ways, I feel like over the years, because, I've been gaming for so long at this point, I feel like over the years, people have definitely created unrealistic expectations for themselves in a lot of video games, to the point where they'll see like some marketing push for some random game and they'll think like, oh my God, it's going to be exactly like that. It's going to be perfect. And it's not going to have any issues at all. And it's like, look, video games have always had issues. Some of the best video games ever still had issues. Like nowadays, a lot of people, we were talking about The Witcher 3 earlier. Right. A lot of people like Witcher 3 is the best game of all times. Like, did you play Witcher 3 when it came out?
It was buggy.
Yeah, it was buggy as hell. It had a lot of problems. It was like, a lot of people were crashing all over the place, couldn't boot up the game. It had a ton of problems.
Right.
It's like all of a sudden, all those are gone, and this game is perfect forever. Like, look, Witcher 3 is freaking amazing. All I'm saying is that a lot of games, even back then, not only did not release perfect, but weren't even perfect after you played them. Right. So it's like, a lot of times I see people, complaining about, like, I've seen a lot of complaints when it came to Rise, when it released. And I was like, I think Rise is a fantastic game. I don't really see these problems that people are seeing in the game. But again, like I said, I also have my biases. And one of those biases is Monster Hunter. Another one of those biases is Dark Souls. So, it is what it is. I'm always going to have fun with those games. To me, those games are always going to be good, even if they're not as good as like the previous one. So here's another example, a more recent one for me. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I love the Xenoblade series. I think they're amazing. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, in my opinion, is the worst Xenoblade game I've played so far. I haven't finished it yet, but it is the worst Xenoblade game. I still enjoy the crap out of it. I don't think it's a bad game. I just think it's the worst Xenoblade game.
Sure, but then it's all comparative. You're just because something might not be as groundbreaking or as awesome as Xenoblade 1 or 2, for instance, just because comparatively it may be worse doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, it's not like you're playing Bad Rats on Steam, for crying out loud. You want a bad game, go play that, okay?
Go play Bad Rats on Steam. That would be great.
I had one viewer give that to me as a gift for one. I think they were trolling
a meme.
me. Yeah.
That's a meme. People do that on purpose. So like now you have Bad Rats on your library and you can't take it away. Although nowadays I think you can kind of like hide it and pretend that it's not there. So you can kind of like, hide this game and pretend that I don't have it. Okay, there you go. Now I don't have Bad Rats on the game.
I have absolutely no shame. So as far as that's concerned, I mean, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to wear, you know what? I'm going to like print out the cover art of the game and put it on my wall back there. That's what I'm going to do. Oh man.
Yeah. That's actually funnily enough, that's actually one of the problems that we have with gaming community nowadays as well, is that sometimes a game comes out that is so bad that the community glorifies it, which is interesting. It's an interesting fact. So like, for instance, you've heard of Gollum last year, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. You did.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask you, have you heard of Remnant 2?
Yes.
Okay, so you've also heard of Remnant 2. Okay, that's
Yep.
fair.
Well, have you heard
You know,
of Kong?
I should have. Yeah, I've heard of Kong as well. I should have gotten like a more
Obscure.
a more obscure game. I couldn't think of any, so I just brought up Remnant 2. But it's like the point is, there's a lot of really good games that
Sure.
came out last year that people don't know about. But meanwhile, everybody knows about Gollum and Kong
Right.
because there's a bunch of people that bought them just to make fun of it. But the thing is, whenever you're, you know, a live streamer, a content creator, whatever, if you buy something and you show it to people, there's going to be somebody else that buys it too.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, those games could even have been somewhat successful in what they were meant to do.
You know,
It's a weird thing.
It's kind of like feeding the trolls, right? Because it
Yeah,
gives
exactly.
it gives it that magnifying glass of attention, and now because there's so much attention behind it, now it becomes its own thing. And now that it's its own thing, then it's more successful than it ever should have been, kind of living rent free in our heads when it never deserved to be there in the first place.
Exactly. I don't even know how we got here, but yeah, that's a strange thing.
Well,
it was the bad rats.
It was the bad rats.
Yes.
Does it to us every single time, darn it. But I think that when it comes down to the theory crafting and speculating for Monster Hunter Wilds and how we have the propensity sometimes just as human creatures to set ourselves up with higher than average expectations for something that we kind of like idolize, that we also need to make sure that we're setting ourselves those realistic expectations to kind of just say, hey, like I can be okay with it. I'm going to make my peace with it now if it doesn't deliver in the way that I think it should, and go with it go into it with an open mind, because that's how I'm going to enjoy it. If I'm going into it with a perspective that I'm going to be critical of this, if this doesn't give me my wish list, then yeah, you're not going to enjoy it, and then you're going to hate it. But if
again, I think that is definitely something that a lot of people suffer from. And I just feel like I'm usually personally I'm usually not affected by that. It's like, I think there's been very few games where I was like, oh man, I was really expecting this game to be like this, and it turned out to be like that, and now I don't like it. There's definitely been a few. I can't really remember them right now, but I remember feeling that way in some video game. So there's definitely been a few, but there's not been that many. So I feel like I can get as hyped as I want to be about Monster Hunter, and it's not going to bother me when the actual game comes out. Then again, I also have a lot of faith in Capcom, so
same.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
For you, with what you understand of the direction that they're taking, kind of how they're like evolving on World's formula and the foundation that World built, do you think that this is a good direction for Capcom to take from a business perspective and a gamer perspective as well?
I kind of hope that Capcom isn't really thinking about that. I don't know if they are or not, because again, we are speculating that this is the new World and that this is kind of like a continuation almost of Monster Hunter World. We don't know if that's the case. My hope is not whether or not this is a good business for them. My hope is that their creative personnel and their design team isn't even thinking about that. Right. I just want them to focus on making a good game. The last thing that I want them to focus on is, oh, are we making something that is commercially viable? I don't want them to even think about it. It's like, look, just make something. We're going to play it. I'm like 99% sure it's going to be fun because I've yet to play a Monster Hunter game that I didn't enjoy. So, you know, with the exception of the first time that I tried Try and all that, but
right.
But I think that the chances of me not liking the game that they're working on is going to be very slim. So mostly, I just want them to focus on making a game. I don't know if it's but let me try and answer your question though. Would it be a good move? Like, let's say if I even cared about that, would it be a good move for them to continue World? From what I've seen from the community in my comment section, and from what I've seen during the height of World Iceborne, yes, because I had so many people that actually just straight up thought that there was going to be, oh, I can't wait for the Fireborn expansion. I was like,
I love that.
That's not happening. I don't think you know how Monster Hunter works. They're not doing that. They do their one game, their one expansion, and then they move on to the next.
Yep.
So considering that that's like what a lot of people expected, yeah, I think it would be a very good business move for them to basically build on what World is built. Evolve on what World is built.
Clearly there's a hunger for it, and especially with Return to World becoming such a I mean,
isn't that insane?
yes, the player base for Rise has definitely skyrocketed too, but Worlds has just like unparalleled number of players now, with people not only who have consistently played World, but also old hunters returning to World, and then new hunters now returning to World as well as their first experience as a fifth fleeter. And I'm just like, I'm out here thinking like, wow, this amount of momentum. I mean, not only is it good for business for Capcom, but this amount of momentum means that this is starting to parallel a phenomenon at this point, where Monster Hunter is now becoming the likes of Mario or Zelda. And
okay, let's maybe not go that far, but
okay. All right, let me take that one back.
I feel like Mario and Zelda have just been like so iconic over the years. And here's the thing: I'm not even like a big Mario or Zelda fan.
Sure.
I love the first Zelda that I've actually played was Twilight Princess. That's like,
good one.
to give you just a frame of reference, right? That's kind of like when I jumped in. And Mario games, the first Mario game that I completed was the one with the hat. What was it called?
Odyssey?
Odyssey.
Yeah.
Odyssey was amazing. I loved
it. It was so good.
So I played, Zelda and Mario before, but I'm not but even not being the biggest fan of those two characters,
right,
I can acknowledge like how iconic they are.
Yep.
And I wouldn't say that Monster Hunter is at that level just yet, but it's definitely, getting closer to that, which to me is friggin' awesome because I've always wanted that for the franchise.
With the way that it's grown and the amount of hype that has been generated and the amount of investment, obviously, that Capcom is pouring into this, if this continues this trend of growth and explosive growth at the rate that it has been, I mean, I could see it mirroring either of those two IPs. I mean, obviously they're huge, and I want to continue to see them grow. But as they become more and more of a phenomenon within the gamer space, we're going to have that many more new hunters coming in who are going to need mentors. There's going to be more, older hunters that are coming in that are going to provide their own perspectives. There's going to be a lot of seasoned veterans as well as newbies, and more people are then going to be able to get plugged into this community. And then that continues to feed back into the community because everybody's playing together or finding people to get connected with, and communities and content creators, for instance.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's something that I feel like is a really positive thing for Monster Hunter, because there's definitely an aspect sometimes that I see from the community where they want to kind of like gatekeep a little bit. And you definitely felt that around when World released. There was definitely a lot of hunters that were saying this isn't real Monster Hunter because it was much more fluid than it used to be. It didn't have that I hesitate to call it the clunkiness of old Monster Hunter because I don't really consider it to be clunky.
Methodical?
And I know that you can call it methodical, but everybody recognizes it as clunky. But the interesting thing about that is that anybody who's actually seen gameplay of an experienced hunter, like you look at Kanta playing like the old Monster Hunter games, and you're like, this doesn't look clunky at all. He's just completely dominating this thing. The problem is it's hard to replicate for someone that doesn't know what they're doing. But anyways, I've seen some gatekeeping from some of those people back then when World released, claiming this isn't the real Monster Hunter. And I think that that's just bad for the community. I've always been of the opinion that, like, look, I want as many people as possible playing my game, but I just don't want the game to get like multiple difficulty levels, because I want the developers to focus on one experience,
right,
and making that damn near perfect, right?
Right.
So to me, the explosion in community, I see it as a super positive thing. Like, bring on everybody. Everybody come play Monster Hunter. Drop whatever game you're playing, come play Monster Hunter. That's awesome.
It doesn't matter if you're one of the top echelons of the most skilled hunters out there, or completely like tripping over yourself the entire time and dead weight the entire fight. There's always going to be people that are going to be there to go hunting with, and that want to take you under their wing or to learn from you, or whatever the case may be. There's always going to be someone out there. And I love that so much, even if there had been some measure of gatekeeping, because I'm sure that there will be when Wilds releases too.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Yeah, it always happens.
But how many people have eventually come around? They've still played it. They've still enjoyed it and sunk hundreds of hours into it.
That's the beautiful thing about gatekeeping. You actually can't gatekeep anybody from playing a video game. You can try, but it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to steal their wallet? Like,
are you going to unplug their Ethernet cable so they can't download it? Like what?
It's not happening. You can't gatekeep it. So I think that that's a very good thing. To me, the most impressive thing though with the Return to World campaign, and this is the meme that you see all over the place, is that Capcom really just went and said, you know what? What if we all just went back and played Monster Hunter World? And people went, you know what? Sounds like a good idea.
They're just like,
now,
yes, sir.
Now, I had spoken about jumping back into World, and I had actually said that I wanted to play World without having Iceborne installed. And I didn't even know that you could just disable Iceborne on Steam, because you can. You can just straight up go, you can right click, go to properties, and just disable Iceborne. And I didn't know that you could do that, because most of my Monster Hunter time is usually on console. So like I played World on PS4, played Rise on Switch, even though I played a decent chunk of Rise on PC as well. But like, so when I was thinking about returning to World, I was like, oh man, be so cool. And a friend of mine just goes on Discord, oh, you're doing the Return to World thing? Okay. You're going to disable Iceborne, right? You can just right click. And I was like, wait, what? You can do that?
Today I learned.
Hells yeah. That's awesome.
Let's go.
Because I actually prefer base World. So like whenever it comes to my favorite game of all time, it's Monster Hunter World, but it's base Monster Hunter World. Like I like Iceborne, but I like base Monster Hunter World more.
That's fair. I felt that at the end of Iceborne, there was a bit of like HP bloat to kind of like increase the substantialness, like how substantial the fights would be. They kind of just tacked on tens of thousands of HP onto some of those end game monsters. I felt it was much more balanced in World, and early Iceborne I did too.
The HP wasn't really the thing for me. It was more, I didn't like what they did with the gun lance. The maintenance cost of Wyvern Stake Blast, it was just complete nightmare.
Yeah.
And I also didn't like the fact that, you know, if you're trying to be optimal, it kind of boils down to, is the monster enraged? No? Wall bang it.
Yep. that has
is
been
the monster enraged? Keep going as usual.
That has been one of the most divisive topics for me. Now, I am very much a fan of the Clutch Claw. I love the Clutch Claw. I love how you can use it for navigation when you're in the fight. If you were looking to evade, sometimes you can evade an attack just by clawing onto a particular part of the monster. You can use the wall bang, for instance. You can redirect it. And of course, you can soften it. But I felt that there was so much of a heavier reliance on the softening mechanic just to be able to maintain DPS that was a little bit frustrating, and it made a lot of the fights a slog if you wanted to have more of that sort of like grassroots experience where there was a song and dance, like you were dancing with the monster as your dance partner. There was definitely a tempo to it, and there was a consistency to the cadence of the fight. But then it's Clutch Claw, and then it's Soften, and then okay, well then I can hit anything. It doesn't matter. It's softened.
Yeah, it's just something that I feel like it's one of those things that is fun in a lot of aspects. Like wall banging a monster against another monster is just a super satisfying thing. I think it's more satisfying to wall bang a monster into another one than to wyvern ride a monster and beat the crap out of the other monster with wyvern riding.
Fair.
I think wall banging is more satisfying because even though you have an element of control, you're not literally controlling what the monster is doing. You're just like trying to line up the perfect thing, and there's still a lot of things that you can't directly control. Like sometimes maybe when you clutch claw the monster, he's not in the position where once you slap it, he's not going to be aimed properly. So there was a lot of stuff in there that was still out of our control, and it was kind of like a wild element, so to speak. And I like that, but it's just the consistency with which you could, I feel like there should be potentially a bigger cooldown on, like, think for instance, you know, the what's that spider that you can use? No, wait, there's no cooldown to that, is there? Well, there's no cooldown, but there's only so many spiders in the map. The spider that you can use to like grab onto the monster's face and yank it in Rise.
Okay.
I forget what the name of her is. It's like the clutch spider, basically. I'll just call it the clutch spider. But you know, I feel like if you could only use the wall bang as often as you get to use that spider in Rise, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it.
Fair.
Like, let's say you do a hunt, you get to use it like 2-3 times tops. The problem is that, you do a hunt, you get to wall bang all the goddamn times. Like, hey, wall bang here, wall bang there, nonstop. And you're incentivized to do it too, because like it's damage, and if you hit another monster, it's more materials. It's like it's massive.
Absolutely. And then it's crowd control too. Think about it. I mean, you wall bang it, and now you've got what, 15 to 20 seconds, which in a fight like that is huge, where the monster is vulnerable. So you become very, very quickly overpowered, and you basically, I mean, it feels good for the god complex in all of us, I guess. But, you know, like it just kind of reduces it down to you're controlling the monster now, you're controlling the entirety of the fight. And having a limitation on that maybe would be good, or at least getting rid of the softening mechanic. For me, I think is probably.
See, softening didn't bother me that much because I was playing Gunlands. I don't care.
Oh, you don't care anyway. Yeah, it's not an issue for you.
Whatever. I'll soften whenever I go in there to extract ammo from him to stick into my Wyvern Stake Blast.
There it is. Yep, fantastic. So I have one question that's sort of just like an off the cuff trivia question here. But for you, are you a controller or a keyboard and mouse player? Controller. Same. Yeah,
controller. Like, and here's the thing: I'm a controller in any game that I possibly can use a controller. So, for instance, I play Final Fantasy 14, and I play Final Fantasy 14 on a controller. That's an MMORPG.
Wow. Respect for that.
I've rated Savage on a controller because the implementation is that good that you can rate Savage and be pretty much flawless if you're good enough, which I wasn't, but you can do it.
Okay, so do you bench black holes and eat nails then? Like, because you're tough?
It's not that big a deal. It's not, when the controller is properly implemented in the game, it's not really that big a deal. The thing is, not a lot of games that aren't designed around controllers know how to properly implement controllers.
Fair. Yeah, I learned on controller, and I've tried because I prefer KBM for my dexterity with the mouse when I'm talking about like drawing crosshairs on something. I can do that much better with a mouse than I can with a control stick. But even the swapping weapon to the bow, for instance, I made the Rajang bow in World, thinking, hey, you know, I've got a crosshair here. This would make more sense to me. Maybe I can use this as my gateway into converting over to keyboard and mouse. There's just nothing like the controller. I can't do it.
You'd actually be surprised because I asked that question in one of my videos, and you know, I said something like the mouse and keyboard I think is serviceable. And people are like, no, I would never play the game with a controller ever. Like they love the mouse and keyboard in Monster Hunter World, and I was very surprised. I was like, wow, okay. Some said, you know, it took a little bit of changing the keys around and whatnot to get it just right to the way that they like it. But that's, you know, one of the advantages. If the game has proper implementation of mouse and keyboard, you can just do whatever the hell you want with it. So it's whatever. But yeah, a lot of people swear by mouse and keyboard in Monster Hunter, which was surprising for me. I didn't expect it to be quite that many.
I didn't expect it would be that many either. And then I started seeing, you've been watching Asmongold. So, you know, like him trying it for the first time, and he went keyboard and mouse, and he learned keyboard and mouse. And so that's how he understands how to control, and that's just become intuitive to him. It's just been so cool to see him go. But I love the reaction short that you did, where he was learning the charge, and you're talking about the overcharge, and then further on in the fight, he gets the charge, and he doesn't overcharge his greatsword, and he nails it, and you're just like, oh yes, that's it.
Exactly. Like, because the cool thing about that is that it also allowed me to teach that to other players, because there's actually a lot of players out there that don't know. Like we all just assume, we all just assume that everybody knows the optimal practice of the game. They don't. I've had some people message me like, wow, I have like 300 hours in this game. I didn't know that you can overcharge a greatsword thing. And I was like, yeah. This is like this is actually really useful, and this was something that I wasn't expecting when I did that first reaction. There were a ton of people that were telling me, "Oh wow, I watched this video and I actually learned quite a lot of things," which is why I was like, "Okay, I'll follow it up and I'll do a couple more," because I don't want to just like it'd be very easy, flood my whole channel with reactions. Right? I even know the fights because people sent me like all the fights they wanted me to react and whatnot. I even know exactly which fights to pick, but I'm like, it's too much. I don't want to go down that road. I want to be making my own content as well, but I will do more of it. But I want to do it in a way that I can also educate people somehow And it's actually really interesting. I almost wish that he had played other weapons so that I could also criticize some of the other weapons and be like, here you could have done this, here you could have done that. And, it's interesting.
It's been so neat to see him learn, though. And he's been really dedicated to learning, because I remember him starting out and he's just like, well, what's all this about? And he seemed to just want to do it for a giggle at first. And then he started playing it. And then it was, history from there. And he's been getting
all the way up in Iceborne right now, I think. Right as we're recording this, I think he's probably playing.
I wouldn't even be surprised, because he was tail end a couple of days ago, tail end of Base World. And then started Iceborne just I think yesterday he released a video. And it's really cool that even with all of the hype surrounding it and whatnot, that's going to generate enough new traffic to begin with. But then you get a high profile creator like Asmongold, and now his entire community, all of the people who have already played, and they're cheering him on in chat and helping guide him. But then there are other people that are then learning from that and getting exposed to this. And now it's got even more visibility in a way that, it's like that sort of not a vicious cycle, but it does kind of feed into itself and continue that momentum.
Yep. Although, actually, I'm curious, because I looked up earlier today, and it was the first time that I didn't see like a growth, because it had been growing all the way up until like, I think 163,000, give or take. But I think that today's was like, it felt like it might have reached the peak. I'm hoping it doesn't, because I'd like to see it go even further. But today when I checked it, it was actually like 161,000. Yeah. See, it's dropping a little bit right now.
Okay.
So I think we might have reached the peak, which kind of sucks. I wanted it to actually go above the all-time peak. That was never going to happen. It was impossible for that to happen. But it still felt good to see it go as high as it did. And maybe it will still go a little bit higher, who knows? But it was just such a magical moment. And it's something that you've never really seen before. And, because a game that was released 6 years ago doesn't get an update, doesn't get like literally anything added to it. It's like, hey, let's just play this game again. Okay.
Right.
160,000 people. And here's another important part of it, is that people see, there's 160,000 people playing Monster Hunter World. No. You got that wrong. There's 160,000 people playing Monster Hunter World at the same time. Yeah. So realistically, it's actually much more than that. Probably over 1 million on Steam alone. That doesn't include consoles, because on the PlayStation, for instance, the game has been a part of PlayStation Plus. And on Xbox, it's a part of Game Pass.
Right. And the only numbers that we're drawing from is just PC on Steam. Yeah. And so
there's like millions of players playing the game right now.
Yep.
Like no questions asked.
Oh, yeah. And that is unprecedented for a game that will be nearly 7 years old by the time, or maybe more than 7 years old by the time that Wilds releases. To be able to have this sort of dedicated fan base is insane. But the thing is that it's always had a dedicated fan base. Monster Hunter has always been had initially been very niche, but was very dedicated. It was like cult classic sort of thing. And now that the mainstream audience has experienced World, they are now part of that cult. They are
and it's a cult precisely because there's nothing quite like it.
Right.
There's no other game that feels like there are obviously games that try to replicate the formula. Like you look, for instance, at Tokiden, which is a great game. You look at God Eater. You even look at recently last year, Wild Hearts, who also tried doing that. And Wild Hearts was also very fun. But there's nothing quite like Monster Hunter. They can try and get the formula, but there's just something about Monster Hunter that you can't replicate.
It really it's unfortunate, because I did buy Wild Hearts for PS5
why is that unfortunate? I had a good time with it. You didn't like it?
I couldn't. No.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. And I'm glad that you liked it, because at least you didn't waste your money on it. Okay. But I went home.
No, but I didn't buy it. They sent me a copy.
Oh, come on. I had to buy mine. And I didn't like it.
No, but like if I had paid for it, I would have been happy with what I've gotten out of the experience. I liked it. I thought it was fun. The biggest problem was that it was undercooked. Yeah. They messed it up. It was nowhere close to being ready. I was like, bro, what is this? Like, I don't know how many hours you've played, but to give you an idea, I had a bug that I only experienced 60 hours into the game. And this was like a super egregious bug where in like the game just starts running in slow motion. It doesn't even feel like a performance problem. The game is just literally running in slow motion. It was so bad.
Oh,
apparently
no.
on PC that happened to people like on the first couple of hours. I was like, wow, okay, that's really bad.
Maybe that's what happened to me, because mine was a blurry, sluggish mess. And
yeah, that might have been it. It's just like super slow. It feels like you're playing in slow motion.
Yeah,
that was a bug. You're not supposed to play the game like that. No wonder you didn't like it. If you still have it, you should probably try it now. You'll probably have a good time.
I sold it. Oh. I gotta tell my wife this. When I get off this call, I'm gonna tell my wife like exactly what happened and why I hated Wild Hearts. And by the way, Ruri told me it was a bug.
Yeah, it's like the game was actually it actually had some really cool ideas. Like for instance, you get to choose where you make your camps.
Okay.
That was such a cool thing because like I would navigate the maps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would kind of know more or less where each monster would spawn.
Mm-hmm.
So I would make my camp strategically, and then I would create this zip line structure because you could make zip lines dynamically in the game.
Yeah.
And I would have all of my camps linked up with zip lines. So wherever the monster would show up in any map, I'd be like, I go here, and from here I go there, and I'm there. It was like 2 zip lines away. And that was so much fun, just like customizing the map. And some of the monsters were fun too. But again, the problem was it lacked some polish. There was some definitive problems there, which kind of sucks because the game was fun, but they messed it up. And it's like just from a technical perspective, the game was a technical mess. It was running at 1080p on a PlayStation 5 and it was scratching to get 60 FPS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? That's weird.
It was weird, and I didn't understand why there was such a heavy performance impact, even in its performance mode. It must not have been optimized well enough. Is the only thing that I can say. But it was pretty. It was a really good looking game, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, this looks so neat, kind of like Monster Hunter. Why don't I get...
And here's the cool thing. The story, at this point, I don't think anybody cares. There's a moment in the story where the village gets attacked and you fight in the village.
Oh, come on. That's so cool.
It is. Like there was some really cool moments in that game. The problem is, again, there were just too many problems. And a lot of people were just like, bro, screw this. I'm getting my money back. And I think that was the right thing to do because the game did have a lot of problems. It really sucked.
And that's what I did too. Oh, bummer.
At the end of the day, even that game, you can't really capture the essence of what is Monster Hunter.
No,
I don't know. I don't know. There's just something there that I haven't seen anybody else get even close.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I think that's the magic that they're looking to capture. That's very clear. That thumbprint is all over Wild's trailer, anyways.
Yep.
So I'm confident, like, despite any reservations or expectations or ideas or hopes that I may have, I definitely trust Capcom's creative vision and what they're doing with it and being able to capture that sense of magic. And anytime that I have a doubt, I go back and watch the trailer and I feel that sense of magic all over again. Like I'm so hyped for it.
Yep.
Now, I am coming up on time here. So I wanted to, before we wrap things up, I wanted to ask you one question that's related to your community.
Okay.
Tell me what an iron breaker is.
I don't wait. Do I have the book here? Oh, I do have the book. Wait, maybe I can show you what an iron breaker is. So, an iron breaker is a unit from Warhammer. I don't know if you've ever played Warhammer Fantasy Battles.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it! I know that I have. Oh, here we go. You see? Wait, where is it? These ones right here. This is not going to play well in audio, but you see these ones? That's an iron breaker. It is a heavily armored dwarf. And the idea basically is that an iron breaker is someone who is incredibly stubborn. It is someone who You're going to jump into, say, Elden Ring. You're going to fight Melania, and you're going to be there for like 10 hours in a row if that's what it takes. Well, not in a row because, people have jobs and stuff, but like you'll be there for 2 hours and then you go to your work. Then you'll come back and you'll be there for 2 more hours and you'll basically bash your skull. It's not going to beat you. That's an iron breaker. Not just that, but also you're someone who's going to be helpful to other people. You're going to be like, oh, you don't know how to, you don't know how to do the full burst combo with the gun lance. You're going to go and you're going to tell them how to do it. And that's kind of like what I consider my community to be. Helpful dudes who don't give up. Like, that's it. It's just a group of helpful people that do not give up. And that's kind of like what I try to pass onwards. It basically also stems from the fact that whenever I play an MMORPG, I play the role of a tank. Yep. So, tanky dwarfs, all of that stuff.
It's very on brand for you.
I just have very good memories of my Iron Breakers whenever I used to play Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was this, I always like telling this story. There was this one dude who was very arrogant. He played High Elves in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And so High Elves have very powerful cavalry. It's not the most powerful cavalry in the game, but this guy in his army had really powerful cavalry. So he looks at my army and he just tells me, what's your most expensive unit? Because Warhammer Fantasy Battles is by points. So the more units you destroy from your enemy, the more points you get. Okay. So he was basically saying, what's your most expensive unit? Because I'm going to kill it. That was the implication. I was like, it's my Iron Breakers. So he's like, okay, I'm going to charge the Iron Breakers head on. And I was like, the biggest smile just comes on my face. I'm like, because dwarves, they move slow.
Right.
They're not very fast. And so him charging me head on gave me all the advantages in the world. So he gets like a bucket load of dice. He drops it on the table. And he's like, here's all of my attacks. And I was like, okay, you've successfully killed 2 dwarves out of my unit of 20. Now it's my turn. And I grab my dice and I kill like, I don't know, a buttload of elves. And then the worst part is that as this person is rolling for leadership, which is what you do at the end of a combat situation, he fails. And what happens in that situation, they turn around, they run. And as they are running, he rolls very low on the dice that determine how far you get to run away from. And I'm like, I'm going to chase. And dwarves, again, they're very slow. They're not very good at chasing. But they did catch up to this cavalry unit of elves, which basically means they're all dead. Like, people were walking by our table, and he was like, wait a minute. He chased your cavalry and caught you?
With dwarves.
Yes. With dwarves, yes.
Karmic justice. I love it.
Yes. Yeah, that's what an Iron Breaker is. Like somebody who's just like chill person, likes to throw their head at hard challenges, and it helps everybody out around them.
I love it. You heard it from the man here. Ruri, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. I've enjoyed this conversation, and it's just been an absolute splendor for me to be able to brush elbows with you. So thank you so much for giving me this time to discuss this.
No problem.
Did you have any final thoughts or words that you'd like to address the community?
I realized midway through the interview that I hadn't asked you the most important question of all. What's your main weapon?
Oh, I am I'm a glaive enthusiast. I am.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Oh, okay, good.
If you were to say longsword, we would have a problem.
Oh, okay, all right. What are the like instant ban weapons on your list? They got longsword and what? Sword and board?
Bowguns.
Bowguns.
No, I love sword and board.
Oh, okay, all right. Heavy bowgun or light bowgun or just both?
All of them. And
all right, I'm gonna go start playing bowguns and longsword. Ruri, thank you so much for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
Flexible. It was fun.
Absolutely. So if all y'all don't know Ruri, I mean, if you're here and you like Monster Hunter, I'm sure that you do, go make sure to give him a follow. The links will be in the description below towards his channel. So go make sure to subscribe and go support another fellow creator, somebody who's just given a lot of life, love, and longevity to the Monster Hunter community. And Ruri, thank you again.
Thank you.